Okay, to talk about this meeting and the impact of U.S. tariffs on the EU and more, we're joined by David Tawil. He is the president of Prochain Capital. Welcome to the program, David. It's good to see you.
Likewise. Good evening.
Okay, so how significant is this meeting between Trump and Giorgia Meloni for the future of U.S.-EU trade relations, and how much are these two leaders alike philosophically?
So to start with your last question first, they're quite aligned philosophically. You know, as your correspondent pointed out, she was the only person from the EU to go ahead and attend the inauguration. In terms of her political leanings, it is quite far right. And she has previously had good words to say about Trump, and Trump has praised her as well, which he has not done for many leaders in the EU. So they do have a good eye to eye. But that being said, whether she can be the catalyst to go ahead and bring about a negotiation and a resolution with the rest of the EU with respect to tariffs remains to be seen. I'm sure the EU is happy to have had her as their emissary because she is in the good graces of Trump. But the real question comes down to what is Trump's real ask going to be from the EU vis-a-vis tariffs, and whether the other countries are going to go ahead and be able to swallow those asks.
Yeah, and David, we also heard these two leaders talk about the fact that they believe they can reach some kind of trade deal. Now, if indeed this does happen, how could this deal affect the relationship with other major EU nations, such as Germany or France?
First and foremost, with President Trump, hope springs eternal. There is never a point in time where he says that a conversation went poorly, especially if we're not privy to it as the public. So that's first and foremost. Second of all, with respect to Italy, yes, it is the third largest economy in the Eurozone. But even if Trump is able to go ahead and cut a deal with his friend in Giorgia Meloni, because Giorgia is willing to go ahead and give up on a lot, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to have as easy a time with more difficult counterparties. Parties that have no choice but to go ahead and dig in their heels, parties that don't see very well eye to eye with President Trump, and counterparties that have otherwise been degraded and demeaned by President Trump as opposed to Giorgia Meloni.
Yeah, that can be a target-rich environment there at the end. Now, what industries may this proposed 20% reciprocal tariff hit hardest, talking in a broader context, if a deal ultimately is not reached? And what could that mean overall for the EU economies?
So, you know, it's interesting. It seems like what Trump wants in the United States is for there to be a decrease in consumption of foreign-made product. And if you look at Italy, interestingly, clothing is a big number for Italy as far as exports to the United States go. I don't think the bigger numbers, such as industrials and machinery, are really where we could go ahead and get some traction. Because in those sectors, it's really the trade goes both ways.
Right.
The exports of the U.S. to Italy are similarly, you know, industrials, machinery. We also get a bunch of, the United States sends a bunch of, you know, raw materials over to Italy as well, such as chemicals and the such. So I don't think that that's where it's going to be. I think where it's going to be able to make progress is on consumables.
Okay, let's broaden it, though, and talk about the other EU economies. What could be hit the hardest there if these tariffs indeed do kick in less than 90 days?
I think automaker parts are going to be hit very, very hard. That is where we've already seen, out of a couple of companies out of the EU, consternation about shipping product to the United States, such as Land Rover and Mercedes have already said, you know, we're going to go ahead and have limitations on our shipments to the United States. There, we will see immediate effects. And similarly, for, I think, again, to go back to the point of consumables and consumer discretionary spending, I think that's where we're going to see the hardest hit sectors, not necessarily those industrials or more, not in the consumer realm of product.
Yeah, and also the backdrop of while Trump and Meloni were meeting, the ECB got what Trump dearly wants, and that's an interest rate cut. So what's the takeaway from the meeting and the news conference?
Well, when it comes to the interest rate cut, frankly, I think Trump would like to go ahead and focus on, the ECB. But the truth of the matter is, Jay Powell, and the United States economy are two very different things than what they have going on over in the Eurozone. And so I don't think Trump, regardless of his rhetoric, is going to get what he wants while Jay Powell is still in the seat. I don't think Jay Powell is going to go ahead and cut on an emergency basis without starting to see some of the concerns, effective in the data. And as a matter of fact, he said not but a day ago that he expects to see inflation coming from the tariffs. And if we see inflation in the United States, well, that moves the Fed further away from cutting because they want to go ahead and make sure that there's pricing stability. And if prices are going up, they're certainly not going to go ahead and cut rates so that potentially prices could rise even higher.